At my mom's funeral, my mother-in-law showed up with a smirk. She said, "This house will go to my son. Maybe I should pick a room now." I told her actually, I'm the one getting this house. She argued, but doesn't a wife's stuff belong to her husband? So technically, this house is my son's, right? I sighed. She chirped, "Let's be friends now." I wasn't sure. "What do you mean?" She said, "I'll take over this room." I asked, "Are we living together then?" She said confidently, "Yes, that's the plan. This house is too good to be empty." I was still mourning, but my mother-in-law acted like nothing was wrong. "Why bring this up now? Can't you see I'm sad? This house is full of memories. It was built by my dad and cherished by my mom. I don't want my mother-in-law here, and my husband is letting it happen." To protect my beloved home, I took action before we moved in. I'm 42, work in an office, and thought I'd missed my chance at marriage. Then I met Michael, 4 years younger, through a friend, and we tied the knot. He's caring and values my input. "Where shall we honeymoon? You mentioned Europe, right?" I asked, "But you said you liked the Maldives." "Let's go there," he suggested. "My mom needs to stay with us. Dad's not well, and she's struggling alone," he explained. "I get it, but didn't we agree not to live with parents?" "You're right, I'll talk to her." My husband always indulges my wishes, which sometimes makes me feel guilty. Finding a good partner is a blessing, but there's a lingering sadness. My dad passed away 3 years before I got married, so I couldn't share my wedding with him. He was a strict boss at a small business, and I looked up to him. Despite the company's size, he earned well, and we had a decent home where we held his funeral. Working in an office made me appreciate my dad even more. Then 2 years after our wedding, my mom also passed away. "Your mom too?" My husband asked, concerned. "Do you need a moment in the other room?" Funerals usually aren't held at home, but we did it for my mom. Throughout my mother's funeral, my husband was there for me, a constant support. I felt incredibly lucky to have him. Then my mother-in-law, Nancy, arrived. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said. "Thank you," I replied. I hadn't spent much time with Nancy before, keeping a respectful distance, but during the funeral, I saw a different side of her. Afterward, Nancy approached me, which wasn't unusual, but her demeanor was strangely cheerful. "Thanks for your help during the funeral. It went smoothly because of you," she said. "Now that it's over, let's drop the formalities." I was surprised. At first, I thought she was being considerate, given my grief, but it soon became clear that wasn't her intention. "Your parents had such a lovely home," I said. "Hold on a sec." She boldly ventured further into the house. "Mom, this isn't a good time. Some areas are a bit messy," I protested. Unfazed, she announced, "Don't worry about the details. What matters is, this house will go to my son. Maybe I should pick a room." I hesitated. "Mom, actually, I'm the one inheriting this house." She smirked. "Your parents didn't have any other kids, right? And doesn't a wife's stuff belong to her husband? So technically this house is my son's, isn't it?" I sighed. "Is that really how it works?" She chirped. "Let's just get along from now on." I paused. "What do you mean by get along?" She confidently replied, "I mean, I'll take this room. You and Michael will move in later, won't you?" I asked, "So we'll be living together?" She declared, "Exactly. It's settled. Such a grand house shouldn't have empty rooms when 2 people can live here. Finally, I won't have to take care of my husband alone." But my mother just passed away, and my mother-in-law is talking about this. Can't she see how sad I am? I'm starting to get angry, even though the funeral just ended. Why would she joke at a time like this? My husband overheard our conversation and intervened. "Mom, what are you saying? This isn't the time for this." My mother-in-law brushed it off. "Why are you making such a fuss?" But my husband was firm. "Please leave." He escorted her out. "Sorry, she can be difficult." He'd apologized. "It's okay. Thank you for handling it," I said. In that moment, I appreciated my reliable husband. Yet later, I realized his reason for scolding my mother-in-law was subtly different from mine. 10 days after my mother's funeral, as things calmed down, we talked about my family home. Then my husband made an unexpected suggestion. "This apartment is cramped. Shouldn't we move to my parents' house?" I proposed. "You're right. With more stuff and maybe kids in the future, it's better than this tiny place," he agreed. "So we should start getting ready," he said, then added, "But there's something I want to discuss about the move." "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated. then said, "Considering the big house and empty rooms, I thought maybe my parents could move in with us." "Wait, you mean live together?" I was surprised. My husband is kind, but lately I've noticed something. While I thought he always valued my opinion, maybe he's just going along with things. Could he be too easily swayed? His suggestion about living with my mother-in-law, despite my objections, makes me wonder. He keeps bringing it up, putting my mother-in-law's wishes above mine. I've said it before. We're not living together. I remind him. But Mom won't let it go, he says. I argue. You stood up to her during the funeral. You defended me and said no to living together. Well, yeah, I was mad about her intrusion, but that doesn't mean I'm totally against it. I just didn't think it was the right time to decide, he explains. It's clear. He nods along and passes on my words, but he seems more inclined to agree with my mother-in-law. Plus, despite advocating for proper discussions, he keeps his distance and avoids making firm decisions. Maybe he thinks he's staying neutral, but people like him can be tricky. They convince themselves they're neutral and can make the right calls. It's frustrating. Anyway, I refused to live with someone who barged into my parents' house on the day of the funeral and suggested taking over a room. I've said it before, and I won't budge. Tell your mom that, I tell him. Why? It really bothers you, he responds. Fine, I'll tell her myself. Well, I had mentally prepared for the possibility of living with my in-laws when we got married. Witnessing my mother-in-law's behavior at my mother's funeral made it clear. Living together in my cherished family home, built by my father and lived in by my mother, is out of the question. And now, with my husband's lack of assertiveness apparent, the idea of cohabitation is unthinkable. When my husband relayed my opposition, my mother-in-law directly challenged me, asking why I was against it when we have such a spacious house. She insisted that as Michael's wife, his parents are now mine too. I've already declined living together. I'm sorry, but with my husband's mobility issues, it's too much for me alone, I explain. So you're abandoning us? Did you even listen to your husband's reasons? My mother-in-law counters. I'm sorry, but after this heartless response, I won't ask anything of you anymore, she retorts. I feel for my father-in-law's health, but based on my mother-in-law's past behavior, I can see a future where all responsibility for him would fall on me if we lived together. If that's the path we choose, significant changes in my husband and mother-in-law's mindset are essential. A few days after my mother-in-law's accusation, my husband began rearranging the living room, shifting furniture, and creating space. What's going on? Are we storing boxes here? I inquire. He responds, no, I'm making room for 2 beds. The mention of 2 beds sends a shiver down my spine. Are your parents coming to stay? I cautiously ask. No, they're moving in, starting today. This is truly the worst, he admits. Despite my objections to living together, my husband and mother-in-law have decided on it. She said she wouldn't rely on me anymore, yet she's turning to you instead. Why? I ask. He explains, their lease is up, so we agreed they'd move here instead of renewing. It'll be crowded for 4 people, but we're moving soon, right? Just bear with it for a bit. But that's not what I meant. Why is cohabitation even an option? I've said before I don't want to live with someone who barged into my parents' house on the day of the funeral and suggested taking over a room. I'll talk to Mom. From now on, we'll be living together, so please try to get along, he insists. Why do you always side with your mom? I question him. He explains it's not about favoring her. I consider both your opinions and make a decision. My husband, usually accommodating towards my mother-in-law, seems to have fallen into her cohabitation plan. Maybe he's unknowingly influenced by her, thinking he's making independent choices. I used to see my husband as kind and caring, but paired with my mother-in-law, he becomes quite a challenge, and now I'm reluctantly pushed into living with my in-laws, just as I feared. This apartment is too small for 4 adults. We'll manage until we move, I remark. It's frustrating. She just arrived, and now she's complaining about the room. I apologize for the sudden addition of 2 elderly people. We'll try not to inconvenience you. If your mobility issues cause any problems, please let us know. My father-in-law, Tommy, who has mobility issues, seems better than expected. He experiences minor discomfort when moving, but nothing serious. Was my mother-in-law genuinely struggling to care for him? He's polite and even offers to do things on his own. Unlike my mother-in-law, he doesn't seem troublesome, or so I thought. Is there a pharmacy nearby? I forgot my medicated patch and need to buy one, my father-in-law asks. Wait, dear. With your mobility issues, it's best to stay here. If you fall outside, it'll inconvenience Michael and others, right? Ask them to buy the patch for you, I suggest. But I usually buy it myself. Didn't they say to let them know if you need help? Well, you have a point. Sorry, but I need it urgently. Can you go get it for me? He sighs. Of course. While fetching a medicated patch might seem trivial, why does my mother-in-law make decisions without involving me? And though my father-in-law seems polite, he appears to follow my mother-in-law's lead, just like my husband. He's become her yes man. It's a small errand this time. But as we continue living together, I fear everything will eventually fall on me. Can I let these people move into my parents' cherished home? It's not a laughing matter. If they move in, they'll tarnish the house. I must find a way to protect my parents' legacy. As my mother-in-law and father-in-law prepared to move into my parents' home, I decided to take preemptive action. My mother-in-law was in good spirits, eager about moving into a spacious house. Hey, can we borrow the key to your parents' house? We want to check out our rooms. I have some errands, so I'll give the key to Michael, she requests. Michael, can you drop us off before heading home? We want to visit the storage room where we left our stuff. We need to measure furniture sizes, she adds. Sure thing. I'll take the key, I reply. Despite my mother-in-law's cheerful demeanor, there were no conflicts between us, and about 10 days passed uneventfully. However, behind the scenes, my preparations were steadily progressing. Okay, everything's set for the move. Life in that house will start soon, I announced once my husband and in-laws finished their preparations. I have something to discuss, I said. What is it? Spit it out, my husband urged. Is it about our move celebration plans? My mother-in-law wondered. No, we're not moving there, I clarified. What? What do you mean? She exclaimed. I handed over a document. This is my application to renounce my inheritance, I said. Renounce your inheritance? That's a joke, right? My husband protested. It's no joke. Look, it's officially approved by the court, I insisted. That house means a lot to me. I couldn't bear to see you living there, so I've decided to let it go, keeping it as a cherished memory in my heart, I explained. What madness possessed you? You could have sold it for money even if you were giving it up. Why abandon it? My mother-in-law scolded. Even if I sold it, you'd just rely on the money. I thought it'd be clearer if I had nothing, I reasoned. We moved out of our old place for this move, you know. What's going on? How will you make it up to us? She retorted. I've always opposed living together, yet you forced it on me without proper discussion. So I had to take a stand. I stood firm. Upon hearing that I renounced my inheritance, both my husband and mother-in-law were stunned, their faces drained. They were speechless, their energy depleted. My father-in-law looked puzzled as he watched them. But I'm not backing down, Michael. I pressed on. I've been considering divorce. What do you think? Divorce? My husband stumbled over the word. Michael, you should divorce this absurd wife immediately, my mother-in-law chimed in. I had expected her immediate call for divorce. What I wanted to know was whether my husband could make his own decision at this crucial moment. If he yielded to my mother-in-law now, our future together would be even more challenging. Even being suddenly asked about divorce is troubling, Mom, my husband muttered. His response was pending, but my determination to go through with the divorce had solidified. Fine, divorce is the only option, my mother-in-law snapped. Michael, it's unavoidable. Your mom is adamant, my father-in-law intervened. Well, it seems you also want a divorce, and maybe that's for the best. Even in significant decisions, my husband and father-in-law remained yes-men to my mother-in-law. And now my husband's words made it seem like he was changing his mind for my sake. Very well, I declared. Let's proceed with the divorce. I'll move out with just the essentials. I spent the night at a budget hotel. The next day, I had urgent matters to attend to, so I took a half-day off work and went back to the courthouse. A few days later, my mother-in-law called me. What's this about the house becoming yours? She demanded. Why this sudden concern? Did you learn about it during the estate division process? I asked. Yes, that house is rightfully mine. You forged documents and deceived us, she accused. Why would I forge court documents? Those are genuine, I replied. Then why is the house going to you when you were supposed to renounce the inheritance? She pressed. After that, I withdrew the renunciation application. Renouncing an inheritance is complex. Once filed, it takes about a month to be accepted, during which it can be withdrawn. The documents I showed were from the application stage, not acceptance. I made you believe I had given up the house and mentioned divorce to see your reactions and plan my next steps. I hoped Michael would oppose divorce. But your mindset didn't change, I explained. So the house really becomes yours? Since it was acquired before the divorce, it's subject to property division, right? She inquired. In such cases, you two would split the proceeds from selling it. She tried to assert her claim. But I had prepared for this. If it were jointly acquired, it'd be shared property. But it's inherited, so it's exempt from division. Unfortunately, specific assets like this aren't eligible for division. I reiterated. Did you consult a lawyer when you found out the house would be mine? She asked. If Michael had paid off the house loan or covered renovation costs, those expenses might have been considered, but I assumed that didn't happen. I replied. What about the money Michael would get through property division? She pressed. We've only been married a short time, so there's not much. Maybe just the car, though it still has a loan on it. I explained. You're selfishly claiming the inheritance, aren't you, heartless? She accused. I'm protecting my parents' memories. I don't want people like you in their home. If you have further complaints, consult a lawyer, I responded firmly. After the call, divorce proceedings went smoothly. Presumably, she urged my husband to divorce me promptly. Regardless, the divorce was finalized and I no longer had to deal with my in-laws. I felt relieved, as if I'd safeguarded my father's home. After I moved out, my former in-laws stayed in the apartment my ex-husband and I used to share. It wasn't spacious, so even with one less person, it must have felt cramped. They explored other housing options, but faced challenges due to their age. Eventually, my ex-husband rented a smaller single-family home for them to live in together. Though smaller, it's still a house, so the rent is likely higher than for the apartment. He'll need to support them going forward. My ex-husband is in for a tough time. My former mother-in-law was excited about the large house my father left behind, but now she's settling for a smaller home. I imagine she's disappointed. As for me, I've started a new life in my parents' house. It feels comforting, as if they're still with me. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time.